What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL videos. We're doing a kind of transfer tips video in this one. I already do something similar to this, like a transfer watch video on Fantasy Football Scout, but I've already done that this week, and now we've got some pretty big news that Kevin De Bruyne is going to be out for a few weeks, as is Jamie Vardy. Now, with him, we don't know quite how long it's going to be, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So I'm going to go through who the main options will be, and I think it's worth doing a video on this, because one, I wasn't going to do one today anyway on my channel, and two, they're obviously a lot of money. There's not too long till the deadline. Obviously, we've got till Tuesday. There's still FA Cup matches and stuff to see, so we don't need to be making rash decisions, but it's also good to get ahead of it and start thinking about different player moves. So in this one, I'm going to give you my thoughts on who the best possible replacements are for Vardy, who they are for De Bruyne. For what it's worth, I don't think there's just one good replacement. It's going to depend on a lot of reasons and a lot of kind of your own thoughts on what you think about certain players, certain teams. But I'll go through kind of some of the pros and cons for some of the main players that people are going to be looking at. If you watched the stream last night, I kind of covered this a little bit with De Bruyne, although we didn't know how long he was going to be out for at the time. And I have kind of done a kind of initial thought stream on Fantasy Football Scout as well. So if you've watched that, most of it's probably covered. You don't necessarily need to watch this video. Not that I'm trying to put anyone off. If you haven't, stay tuned, listen to my thoughts. If you enjoy these type of videos, give them a like. Hit subscribe if you're new around here. Let's jump into it. So let's start with Kevin De Bruyne, because I suspect his ownership is a little bit higher when it comes to live teams, just because of Man City's fixtures, how 18 and 19 fell. Yes, Jamie Vardy's owned by quite a few people as well, but I think De Bruyne is a little bit higher. Now, Pepper's come out today and said that he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, interestingly, there was a kind of link going around on Twitter, a video clip of De Bruyne on Twitch saying that he was okay. But as we've seen before, player diagnosis is not necessarily the same as club and doctor diagnosis. So he's had a scan for the injury picked up against Aston Villa. Very unfortunate to go off for 1 point, but that is what it is when it comes to FPL. And the scan is saying 4 to 6 weeks. Now, we have seen times, I'm not saying Pep is a liar at all, but we've seen times where it gets said how long a player is going to be out for, and then they're either out for longer or out for a shorter period of time. I wouldn't be completely surprised if he's back for that Liverpool game, because they have a period of 3 games starting with Liverpool that are quite difficult. And obviously the league is not by any stretch won, and we're already halfway through the season. So I wonder if he'll be back a bit sooner. But either way, 4 to 6 weeks is going to be more like probably 6 to 7 game weeks plus, maybe even 8. More importantly, he's going to miss the next 3 games, which are West Brom, Sheffield United and Burnley. And they're the 3 that a lot of us wanted him for. Obviously, he's one of the most expensive players in the game as well. So you can pretty much go to any other midfielder with your choices. So on the screen, I've got most of the players that I would be looking at or that other people are looking at. There's, of course, other options you could go for. And obviously, that's completely up to you. I'm not trying to tell you who you should go for. I'm just giving some initial opinions and stuff on the players in question. And I do think it's quite interesting, because I don't think there's a standout for many reasons. The fixtures aren't necessarily brilliant for everyone. And if they are, like they are for Man City, the options are not necessarily standout. There's lots of different options that have all got the pros and cons. And obviously not everyone's got the same amount of chips. So if you've got a wild card, for example, in 24 and 25, I'd be much more willing to take a punt on a Man City player like Sterling than if I didn't have a wild card, which I don't, because in a few weeks' time, I'm maybe going to have to transfer them out. If you've got a wild card, you can take a punt from 20 to 24 and then wild card them out and just go and stick with whoever you want. If De Bruyne is back, you easily get him back in. So that's going to play into the hand. So Man City, right, Foden, Gundogan, Sterling, Mahrez. I still think there's going to be a problem with who's most nailed now, right? With De Bruyne out, yes, it's going to give more minutes to one player or maybe several players, right, who might get more minutes because he's out. If you think of where he's been playing, he's kind of been playing as a number 10 with like Gundogan and Rodri, or Gundogan and Fernandinho behind him. But obviously Gundogan's been coming forward, right? It's not like Gundogan is sat back like a central defensive midfielder. That's not how it's been working. So someone's going to have to go into that number 10 role. Gundogan could possibly go there. Bernardo Silva could play there. Even Mahrez could play there, right? There's lots of players they have. Maybe Torres gets more minutes now as well. Gundogan seems like the kind of... I don't know what the best way to put it. Probably the safest bet potentially, because he's 5.5 million, so you're not risking a big amount of budget. That also opens up the option of going for like a Son or for someone else, right? So you do De Bruyne to Gundogan, it gives you like 5 million plus to spend elsewhere. So he's an option. He's probably on penalties now. He was already playing kind of 80 to 90 minutes most games. So you'd expect that to continue. So from the cheap options, I think he's probably the most reliable for minutes. If Foden now suddenly got more minutes, and he has looked good. He looked great against Aston Villa down that left side. The only problem is, will Foden now come central? And if he doesn't, he's still kind of competing with all the other players that can play on the wing as well. But if he gets more minutes now, I actually think he's a better option than Gundogan if you take the penalties out of it. I think he's more likely to get you goals, more likely to get you assists. So I like Foden as well, but minutes are a worry. Mahrez I just wouldn't touch right now. There seems to be stages where Mahrez is kind of almost nailed, and he starts missing games, and then someone else comes in and starts more games, and Mahrez is just benched. So I don't get it. I probably wouldn't go for Mahrez. And Sterling, I feel like you're punting on what he has done before, not what he looks like he's going to do right now. The one thing you get with Sterling is you get a Man City player that is almost certainly going to start most games, and he's going to play in the front three. With Gundogan and Foden, we don't necessarily know that. I'm pretty sure Foden will when he plays. And Man City's fixtures are good, right? West Brom, Sheffield United, Burnley. We all know how good they are. And if you've got like £5-6 million Man City player, yes, if they've got tougher fixtures or they don't play too often, you can probably stomach holding that player. So for me right now, I'm thinking of going cheap. Gundogan, Foden, and spread the money elsewhere. Obviously, the thinner you spread your money, the harder it is to get back. You have to make more transfers. But I guess you could worry about that down the line. If I was on a wild card, I would be tempted to go Sterling because I know I've got a route out of it. But I think Gundogan or Foden are kind of a nice compromise. You're not risking too much money because, let's be honest, with De Bruyne not in the team, Man City might not be as good, right? Because he is the driving force. That's something to consider as well. So I am looking at Man City players, and you should too. Just not sure which one yet. Man United, Fernandes feels like the most obvious replacement if you don't already own him. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because most people already own him. Man United fixtures are really good, right up until like Gameweek 25. So definitely consider Fernandes if you haven't already. Rashford double up is interesting. I think Rashford's done really well, kind of under the radar well this year. Like if you look at his points total, he's been pretty decent for most of the season. The only thing that worries me now is Cavani's also playing well. And if Pogba's playing well, which he is, and he plays on the left, that leaves one spot kind of for Rashford, Martial on the right or up front. And if Cavani plays, that's one less spot. So I wonder if Rashford's minutes will start to be a little bit more managed. I think he's still pretty much nailed on, and he's going to start most games, but we might see him have his minutes managed a little bit. And we'll have to see what happens in the Liverpool game as well, because obviously Man United are playing Liverpool in the FA Cup before Game Week 20. So that's something to consider. So Rashford's an option, which I think will be overlooked, to be honest. But a double up with Fernandes with the fixtures they got is not that bad, I don't think. Because if you go to someone like Son, he plays, or Spurs play, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United in the next 5. They're not great fixtures. You're really relying on Brighton and West Brom to get most of your goals. I fully understand before anyone tells me that Son can score against those teams. I get that. But they are going to be tough games. They are going to be against teams that can defend. Arguably not Chelsea right now, but Man City and Liverpool definitely. And the reverse games were already tight, right? Spurs, they beat Man City, but Man City were all over them. The Spurs played the counter-attack really well. But again, I think it was 2 goals from 2 chances. They played Chelsea, it was 0-0. They played Liverpool, they lost 2-1. They're not high-scoring games. So I think Son is an option because long-term, people are going to look to him. And also, he is going to have double game weeks almost certainly in Game Week 26. And they're probably going to be quite good double game weeks as well. So I can see why people want to go for Son. I still think they've got another game to rearrange as well. And they've got their blank in Game Week 33. That will have to be rearranged. So they are going to have quite a few double game weeks on the horizon from like Game Week 26 onwards. But in the next 5, I don't think the fixtures are great. But if you're like me and you're thinking of getting him anyway for like Game Week 23, maybe you just bring that kind of transfer forward, right? So Son is an option too. I like Fernandes. I think Man United's fixtures are better. I think the way Man United are playing right now, they're a decent team to go for. You just got to hope that Rashford gets enough minutes. I put Liverpool on there, Mane, Salah, because I wouldn't write Liverpool off just yet. I won't go through this in too much detail, but I put a tweet out earlier today about Liverpool's XG. Now, I know some people don't like stats, right, which is fine. I'll make this quick. I think it was from game weeks 11 to 14. Their XG was something like 7.2, and they scored 14 goals. Or was it 6.5? So it was close anyway. It was like 7, and they scored 14 goals. So they overperformed massively. Obviously, the Crystal Palace game was part of that. Then from 15 to 19, their XG was like 6.5, so only a little bit lower, and they scored 1 goal. a massive underperformance. But overall, they've had about 14 XG, expected goals, and they scored 15. So that's about right. But the variance is crazy. They overperformed for a few game weeks and then massively underperformed. And yes, if you look at the way they play, it's not necessarily quite clicking. Not often do you see Firmino and Salah rested. That was, is that sending a message that anyone can be benched now if you're not going to play good enough? I don't know, but I wouldn't write them off just yet. But obviously the fixtures are Spurs, Brighton, West Ham. None of them are easy games. So that's something to consider. But you could go for a Liverpool player if you don't already own them. And then lastly, you got Grealish. He is on 4 yellow cards. So I think he's got to get through the 2 games after Newcastle before that gets pushed up to 10 yellow cards for him, because it's not about getting to game week 19. It's about your team getting to 19 games. So that's something to consider for Grealish. But I think for his price, he's a really good option. And as I've said before, I do prefer him to Barnes and Maddison. And I also definitely prefer Grealish when Vardy is out. We're going to talk about that, Vardy, in just a second. But I think possibly Leicester are now a worse team without Vardy, because that's where all the goals come through, right? I know he didn't score any against Chelsea, but usually the goals go through him. Perez is potentially now an option if he's going to take the striker spot, but it could be Iheanacho. Penalties-wise, they're going to go to Tielemans. That's something to consider. But I think Barnes and Maddison were okay options because of the fixtures, and they probably still will be. But I still think I would side with Grealish. So right now, I'm kind of between getting Son, Grealish, or Gundogan or Foden. I think they're the picks for me. I might consider Rashford. But I need to have a bit of a thought about a transfer plan for my team. And that would be my advice. Go through the next few game weeks. Look at who you want to captain. Look at who the best options you want to bring in anyway are. And if it's someone like Son, maybe just bring that transfer forward. So Jamie Vardy, not quite as highly owned, I know. But still, it's a big worry for managers, right? He's going to be out for a few weeks. Exactly how long that's going to be, I don't know. Pep kind of said 4 to 6. Roger said a few weeks. But to me, that's at least 2. And then that's at least 4 game weeks, right? So again, he probably needs to be sold. I think this one's a little bit easier than Kevin De Bruyne, because for many reasons I've just spoken about, there's lots of options you could go for. With Jamie Vardy, I don't feel like there's enough options to really concern yourself too much. Not genuine options anyway. There's a few punts I've put on the list, like Werner at Chelsea, for example. I do like Chelsea's fixtures, but Werner hasn't started the last 2 games, and I worry that Lampard's getting under a bit of pressure now, and he's not too sure how to handle it. Like he even had a bit of a dig at a journalist for a pretty kind of soft question earlier. It was just about how players are going to react and something like that. And he kind of went, not off on the guy, but he kind of had a dig about the guy's articles. So I just worry about the pressure there. You've benched Werner, one of your star signings, for the last 2 games. It obviously hasn't clicked for him. So that would be massive punt territory, but I wanted to talk about it. For me, a bit like Rashford, Cavani's got the same problems, obviously. He's not guaranteed to start every game. I think a lot of Man United fans, by the way, would like him to start as the number 9 in most games. It'd be interesting to see what team we put out against Liverpool in the FA Cup, because if he starts and the rest of the side is pretty much full strength, then that might start indicating that Solskjaer thinks that he should be the number 9 most weeks. But it does carry some risk with it if you go for that, because Martial can still play that. Martial hasn't just lost his place up front, I don't think, but potentially he has, right? But I don't necessarily think that is the case. So I would probably count him out. The ones I would go to are probably Antonio, Bamford, Watkins. Calvert-Lewin's obviously injured, but Ancelotti is basically said that he's available, but he won't necessarily start in the FA Cup. So we'll have to see if he gets any minutes. Everton's fixtures aren't bad in the league, and obviously he has come down a bit in price. He's kind of been forgotten about a little bit now, but I still like him as an option, especially if everyone else is fit. But the problem is Luca Dean is now also out, so we're going to have to wait until the next press conference before the league game to kind of see how long he's out for. So you can maybe even strike Calvert-Lewin off. So at that point, you're either going up to Harry Kane, in which case the issues I just spoke about with Son, the fact that they play 3 difficult teams in the next 5 fixtures, is obviously still a thing with Kane. But if he's someone you want long term, maybe you want to captain him against Brighton, maybe you want to captain him against West Brom in game week 23, right? And I really would look at captaincy picks before you make your moves, because for me, it was going to be De Bruyne this week and De Bruyne next week. But obviously I can't do that now. Now I'd happily captain Fernandes in game week 20, but in 21 it's a little bit more difficult. And perhaps you want to go for Son or Kane against Brighton, in which case Vardy, for a little bit more money, you can go straight to Kane. It keeps that placeholder, and you've got Kane for those future kind of double game weeks and good fixtures that are coming up for Spurs. So he's definitely an option. If you decide you want to pump more money into midfield, then you're looking at the cheaper options. Antonio, Bamford, Watkins. Fixtures-wise, I think they're all quite similar. The problem for Antonio is after game week 20 and 21, he plays Liverpool, which is not a great game. And I think he plays Villa soon as well. So obviously, fixtures-wise, they're not easy for him. The next game isn't too bad. It's against Crystal Palace. I think he's quite a good fixture. And I do think he is a really good option. But David Moyes has said he's still trying to build up his fitness, right? We saw in the last 2 games he did look quite tired. But then, he still scored 2 goals. So I do like Antonio, but there's a couple of risks there. His injury record so far this season, the fact he's still tired, we have to see him get up to full match fitness. And obviously the fixtures aren't probably as good as Bamford and Watkins. So I still like him, but you've got to take that into consideration, right? And obviously a lot of people will already have kind of Bamford anyway. I wouldn't write Leeds off. I think the fact they lost to Brighton 1-0 has made people rethink them a bit. But they've done pretty well in most games against easier opposition so far this season. Also, a lot of people said the pitch was the problem. They've apparently borrowed a 300, or at least bought a £300,000 pitch from Spurs that they were going to use. So they have got a new pitch ready to go for the next game week. Or they should have anyway. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of mud to play on. So I wouldn't write Bamford off, and they play Newcastle next game, so I think that's good. And obviously Watkins, Villa. I know Villa lost to Man City, and to be fair, if you look at expected goals and stuff like that, they probably did deserve to lose anyway, regardless of that kind of ridiculous offside decision. But they still themselves played quite well, especially in an attacking sense. There was a few times where they countered Man City. It's just that final ball didn't really kind of pay off. So I still think Watkins is a good option. I know he's been frustrating. I've said this on streams. He's been frustrating people because he gets into good positions, is not finishing. But at some point, I think the goals are going to come good for him. So for me, I'd probably go cheap because that's what I'm doing anyway. I don't know if I'm going to go for Kane yet. I'm probably just going to stick with Son. At some point in the next few weeks, I think probably after the Man City game in 24, so from 25 onwards, I do think people will start looking at going Son and Kane again. So maybe factor that into your plans, especially if you don't have a wild card. And if you've already got Vardy, it does seem quite easy just to go up to Kane. But if not, if you're dropping down in price, Antonio, Bamford, Watkins are probably my choices. I want to say that Antonio is my first choice, but I think it would probably be Bamford right now. Although obviously there is kind of an element of not like hope, but obviously you hope. Well, it is hope. You hope they bounce back and start performing how they have done before, and I don't really see why that wouldn't happen. So there's lots of options for Vardy, lots for De Bruyne. If I had both, I'd potentially think about taking a hit this week if I didn't have a decent bench. But obviously it's going to depend on everyone's squad structures. Let me know in the comments below, who are you transferring out for these two, or transferring in once you transfer these 2 players out. So there we go, just a quick video to talk about De Bruyne and Vardy. Pretty big news so far this week, and we might do a few more of these videos as there's some bigger breaking news throughout the rest of the season. So if you have enjoyed it, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new as well. And lastly, if you want to sign up to Patreon, I do have a link in the description below. I'll just quickly show you everybody that's already up and is an absolute legend for signing up. We've got well over 230 people now. So if you want to check it out, like I said, link in the description below. And a big shout out to Reese P, who has signed up since the last stream as well. I will probably be back on Sunday, maybe for a stream. I know I said I was going to stream, but probably for a stream, maybe for the game week preview, team selection on Monday, captaincy on Tuesday, as well as a deadline stream as well. So make sure you check out all that. Make sure you've hit that notification bell so you know when all that is going live. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you again soon.